Oh, she's the first.
Is she actually having her baby right now?
So you're
No.
guessing.
No, I didn't know she was pregnant last week. And she was like at 39 weeks. So
Here
I'm
comes
not very
Brandy.
observant.
Here comes
I
Phil.
don't know why she couldn't do this by Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, in
Come on.
general, why, you know,
Oh,
Oh, in general.
Well, I record them now, so she can. Yeah, she can totally. We put them up on YouTube. Have you guys, have anybody been on the Enfield YouTube channel?
Oh,
Actually, Eric is a star on our YouTube channel.
Should we get his autograph?
I wouldn't, well,
Who is Matt?
you can let them in, but if their camera's off, I would take them out right away.
Does anybody know a Matt?
I
I
don't.
don't.
Ashley's coming. You can message him.
you can message Matt.
They got a last name
Hello.
and address. Hi, pal. Hi, Ashley.
Hello. Hi, Brandy.
Hi.
Hi, Ashley.
Hi.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Lindsay.
Phil.
Hey, silly.
I mean, I will say in,
We're gonna be old friends now, all together here,
right,
all these times.
All these times.
in Friday's meeting, it seemed like a surprise when I said, and all of the meetings are public. And I want to come, and they're like, huh,
Yeah.
we were surprised.
Well, there's a lot of surprise on
I-
all sorts of
Right.
things if you just follow the listserv.
That's been my, and I just sit there and say,
208-9800, that's David.
Yeah, that's David.
I just keep saying, you're an employee and you're
I
not
would
allowed to
just-
respond. Do not say anything.
We've been having, actually, we're slowly transitioning. We're gonna start using the Teams.
Yeah, tell me how that's more secure when it's a public meeting and you still have to let people in.
Yeah, so.
You can do that, you can block them.
All right, it is 6:01, so we are gonna get started. So thank you all for being here. March 28th, 2022, Master Planning Task Force. And for attendance, let's just go around and state your name. So when our minutes taker, is back. Anyways, Lindsay Smith, co-chair.
Eric Russell.
Brad Rich.
Bridget LaBrie.
Celia Fiero.
Maynard Sutter.
Those of us joining on Zoom,
Come from here.
What?
Ashley Wood. And David, is that you via phone? Maybe.
It's not there anymore.
Oh, yes.
Gotta figure out how to unmute.
Phone is muted.
That can be hard.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, if you're driving, don't worry about it. Maybe you can just hear us. And then staff
Rob Taylor, staff.
and consultant.
Randy Saxton.
Excellent. Going over the agenda, we are gonna take off, under new business, we were gonna discuss a possible statement to the
Yeah.
ZBA, and we're gonna actually take that off. David said he had a conversation with somebody from the ZBA. And they're advising against it, so. We will take that off and maybe we're gonna add on the punch list that was sent to us. Does that sound okay?
So under new business, we'll put the punch list.
Yep, so instead of possible statement for Main Street first floor, we'll take that off and we'll add on going over the punch list that Brandy sent earlier. Okay, I mean, you could admit Matt, but if he doesn't turn his camera on right away, we would be ready to delete them.
I've asked him, I'm just waiting for a response. I've asked him through the chat.
Okay,
Sometimes that's been enough if they won't answer the
okay, good.
request.
Sounds good. All right, so we do have just for notation's sake, we do have someone in the waiting room, but we're verifying that they're a person and not a Zoom bomb. So, okay, on to, let's get going. So
James Ivy, that's one of the
That is-
persons from
yeah.
our,
that is someone.
Legit.
Yeah, he was in our fire.
Great.
You haven't met one of our focus groups?
No. Nope. Go ahead and remove them if they come back, maybe.
Or
Yeah.
repeat the question, because
Yeah.
it maybe you just need to repeat it a second time.
All right. Okay,
I think to turn off somebody who just missed the notice and not sure what they're doing. And we all have our Zoom set up differently. Not everybody has the last name on their Zoom profile.
sure. We found though, it has been more, Zoom bombs always seem to just be first name, so. All right, well, we're gonna move on. So review and approval of the meeting minutes. Did everyone get the meeting minutes from March 14th?
Yeah.
2022. That's what we're in constantly. Did anyone have any changes, edits?
I had none.
Did you?
No, I was gonna make a motion, but. Yeah.
Quick to the draw. Hold on. Anybody on Zoom? Phil, Ashley? Any
Make a motion to accept it as is.
all right, so we have a motion to accept the minutes as is.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Folks online, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Phil? Accept the minutes?
Bill, you're on mute. Went to get a drink. We're not getting any response from Phil or David.
Right. Go ahead and accept the minutes. We'll ask Phil. Yeah, majority passes anyways. Excellent. On to the crux of what we're doing here today. Which is reviewing the focus groups, comments, and potential edits to the chapters. Randy, do you want to start us off, or do you want to start anywhere in particular?
Sure.
Oh, that's good. That's it.
Okay.
It's Whitney. Matt Banker, that's her husband.
Whitney, we thought you were a Zoom bomber.
Is she in there?
Yes. Okay, all right. Great. All right, so sorry, go ahead, Randy.
Okay, so you guys should have notes from all 4 of the focus group sessions from last week. The ones from the late Friday session just got sent out earlier this afternoon, so you might not have them directly in front of you, but they exist and are coming your way if you haven't received them by email yet. So those are my written notes from those sessions, and then at the bottom of each of those, I tried to give you some bullet points that occurred to me, the things that we might want to go back and look at again. And then I had a little bit of time this afternoon to sort of walk back through the outline and the chapters and came up with a punch list, which I think is still sort of an in-progress punch list, and we will probably add to over the course of the meeting tonight. But to really hope that over the next meeting time here, this meeting time, that we can sort out who needs to do what by when, et cetera, so we can stay on target for getting you a full draft in time to take out to the community in May. So, Lindsay, were you envisioning sort of talking about each of the focus groups individually and giving those who participated in them on the task force time to share their perspectives?
Yeah, I was thinking we would just take a little time at this meeting to do that. I see in your punch list that some of the decisions are up to those subcommittees, but I guess I would love to hear feedback from everybody that was there and talk about things a little bit. That was pretty much the bulk of what we had planned for today. So,
Yeah, and
to you or
yeah, the reason I set the punch list up like that is that the initial outline that we sort of had, the strategy we had for working on the chapters, I assumed that the subcommittees were going to take those first drafts and go back and do more revising and churning than most of the subcommittees did. So I think this is another opportunity to go back in and do that. So, you know, Rob and I can work on some of the factual pieces that are still missing that need to be put together. But in terms of deciding on policy direction, that really needs to come from you folks. So I'm in some ways handing out homework assignments tonight as much as anything else, and so that we can advance forward.
okay, but is it, you know, is it worthwhile to, I mean, would everybody else here like to share a little bit on their subcommittees? And I know I went to all but one, and what the overall sentiments were that you collected were. Because I think it's important that we hear what people are saying, but we don't necessarily have to take every piece that they're doing. And, you know, like there's some things that are good to know, but may not. I'd like to do a little bit of debriefing, I think, is where I'm at.
So do you want to walk through them in the
Yeah.
order that we held them? That makes probably the most sense.
Let's walk through them in the order that we held them. I think that'll be the most, yes. So the first one we had was land use, which David might be joining us by
Is it
phone.
correct?
I'm hoping. I would try, yeah. And Sealy was there. If everyone had a chance to read through, let's skip the visioning session right now. Since we all did that, it'll be interesting to just talk about visioning altogether, but land use, Sealy. What were some things that stood out to you in the task force meeting that you heard? Also, we can look through Brandy's notes for those that weren't there.
The downtown buildings have not, this is on the first page, have not been able to attract and retain commercial tenants for many years. There simply is no demand for first floor commercial space. I don't know if I fully agree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
As a ZBA member, I can't remember what they had, when they did there were two places. The laundromat and the apartment building that has the long porch on the front.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Glowry come in. So
Hey, can I just interject? It's really hard to hear Sealy online. I don't know if you're looking at the screen while you're talking or what it is, but it's really hard to make you out.
Try to
okay.
project to that.
Sorry.
All right, so anyway, what I was talking about was that not being able to track the commercial business. And I don't think that was a signed in cement kind of thing. I just think at the time, number one, the building wasn't really conducive for one of the buildings that was asked to go to commercial to allow anything really that big in there. We had them all separated into little rooms.
You gotta
And
talk to the
the
microphone.
Glowry, the real estate people came in and said, they told them about the rest of the Upper Valley, about all these places that are not getting businesses. So they talked us into exchanging, letting him have, he's losing money, so letting him have the apartment on the first floor. And the other one was the laundromat where his mother had, was older and was on disability, and she needed a ground floor apartment. So we allowed that for that time. So we really didn't change, we just for that time, we allowed the end of it being an apartment for her. But it was a daycare center at the beginning. So, I think we just have to do more advertising, or we have to go out and get these people in some way, shape, or form. I think there's a potential for it.
So how, I can't find where what
Right.
you're saying now is tying into the land use chapter. Can you direct me? a
Because
little
it
bit?
is,
I thought that's what we were
It's
trying.
it's at the beginning, Maynard, in Kurt's
on the first
uh,
page.
introduction. So the third paragraph from the bottom on the first page, I think, is what Celia read.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
big issue in this town, and
Okay, I see that.
rightfully so.
It was in Kurt Goddard's intro statement, started to talk about that.
Okay.
And I just feel that we have to be more active in getting people in. So, and he did say on the next page, Kurt has said, we are not between maintaining rural character and embracing 21st century technology. In principle number 4, he does not think there is a relationship between rural character and clean energy. I kind of agree with that. It feels like it's another piece. It's a whole different thing. So, and then let's see. So Kurt's very interested, or he brings up building new roads a lot, and that's so expensive. No, for the town, it would be very, very expensive. So I don't think we really have to, if that was to happen, we needed roads, then it's up to the developer. And I know people want to take private roads, but when they came in to develop their place to where they wanted and build their homes, that was their choice to have private roads. And we can't really go in and take up all these private roads. It would just be cost prohibitive, I think, for us. And
So
and that because that's one of the reasons we let them go ahead without having bring their road up to standards. Anderson Hill had to be up to standards.
Sure.
And that meant really putting a road like we build roads. So like anybody would build a road, certain pack on it and layers and
Yeah.
all that.
So I think what we found in the land use meeting was a very clear example of like the big overlap in all these chapters. We had a lot of conversation around economic development and zoning, and like that there has been trouble getting businesses into first floor. So we've had a lot of exceptions, which is the part B that we're now not doing, which is, because there's a new apartment building there or complex that's going to go up in the downtown, and they want to have an exception to having first floor and not do mixed use. But if our master plan says mixed use, and that's what we hear, so we found in the land use chapter, there was definitely a lot of overlap. So there was economic development overlap, there was road overlap, which we had a robust discussion in transportation about private roads versus public roads and sort of the differences and why we maintain some and dirt roads, et cetera. As well as there was a lot of talk about residential housing. So what I took from this chapter is like, this is a really great baseline chapter of just talking about the natural, like this chapter to me lays the foundation for everything else. Because we can only build in certain places, we have to explain soil structures in a way that's not, doesn't take people down too deep of a road unless they want to. We have to talk about, you know, that we can't just put roads everywhere, or we can't put houses everywhere. And I think like this chapter gives us the base to do that. So because we found a lot of the conversation in this particular group really stemmed everywhere else, except for like land use. And then there is a bit of question in a couple of different groups of like, are we rural? We are rural. By definition. I know that happened in your group, right? There was a robust conversation on the use of the word rural, but we are rural, although we do want to have 21st century. So we want to have high-speed internet would be a 21st century, but according to internet companies, we're the final mile, you know, like it does not pay them to build out the final mile in a town like Enfield versus they can have 250 connections within a square block in a city, you know, or in a more
Is
densely
that how it
populated.
works? I really don't know.
Yeah.
I know that.
And
I
that's
have
why,
it.
that's why there are people that don't have as good of services. That's what we mean by the 21st century. We want to be able to keep our rural character and have spaces in between us and
Yeah.
wildlands, but also be able to function in a high-speed internet, you know,
We have
electric
that in our
car.
business district.
Yeah, but wouldn't you want that at your house? So say people
I
live out.
do, it's so slow, it drives me crazy.
Right, so you want actual good internet at your house, but the internet companies are like, it doesn't pay us to build it there. Because that's an extra miles worth of line, and I'm only getting 1 or 2 connections, so we don't want to do it. Versus like, you know, like they'll
Right.
do it in densely populated things, but people in rural communities, we also have to, you know, if everything's online, we need to, and unfortunately, like, we don't have the like collective bargaining that we can do. Anyways, that's where like that juxtaposition that Kurt was talking about. But we found in this chapter that if you read through these notes, so we talked about everything else. So, and there was a lot of talk about recreation, there was, you know, and so.
That does kind of, so really, we've talked about this too, right? You want, like you said, a good foundation chapter to kind of weave the common themes, like why are we having these discussions? Because it touches on all of the themes that are coming, or chapters that will be coming now or going forward. I mean, everything, one thing does affect another.
So Brandy, why don't, your thoughts, because I'm also interested in this points
Yeah.
to consider this, especially the number 1, if you could. But maybe you wanna, you started to interject earlier.
Yeah. Sorry, I was actually going to make the same comment that you did, so that was good. I don't need to repeat it. The first point here is actually, I think, the takeaway for me from this meeting, that in terms of how the chapter is set up, if you have a set of recommendations and those include changes to the status quo, this chapter is perhaps, the way it is written now, is not making a compelling case for that. I actually think the housing chapter is probably better at that than this one is, but we should probably think about that in terms of the content and structure of the chapter.
Yeah, I think this would be a really good foundational chapter. And maybe some of the recommendations are just continuing to make sure that we preserve wildlife corridors, or I can't remember.
I feel it needs to be some more mapping.
More
A little
mapping,
more detailed.
okay.
Because it can be very misleading,
Okay,
and I think that was brought up in one of the,
well,
because it is land use,
mhm.
and we want to build and we want to, you know, go forward, but we have to do what the land allows us to do.
Okay.
So if we can point that out, but I think in a positive way.
Sure.
So I think in just a observation and kind of from reading with this, I assume that some of these people also responded to our survey and the different information, but I'm almost curious if we don't take an advantage every time we have a group of people together to explain what a master plan is. Because I'm seeing some of the questions of, well, who's gonna do the work? And how is this gonna, things that just a basic, so a master plan is a guiding point. It's not, we do not assign tasks to committees. I mean, some of them are obvious, but that's not, our job is not to sit here and say, well, zoning board, you're doing it. I mean, it's kind of obvious who has to handle these things. But we've talked about that too. like,
Well, we're
that's
gonna
not
have
our-
an implementation chapter,
Well,
which
right,
is
and we're
going
gonna have to
to,
direct it,
right, we're gonna direct it.
but we
But
can't tell them, I guess I'm saying, we can't tell them how to do it.
We're
So,
not
yes,
overseeing all of them.
Right.
There, is that, was there a hand up?
Fred's got his hand up.
Okay. Oh, hi, David. Hand up. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, one comment that I think Kurt made to me in a meeting that I had with him, in terms of adding more detail to the map, is it possible to do like a hover over and then you get an enlargement? That's a question for Brandy.
So I know that you have gotten some input from Kurt on the detailing of the map. We haven't had a chance to go back and forth on that. So I'm a little vague on exactly what it is he had in mind. We could certainly do, whether it's a hover over where we separate out and do more maps, that's a possibility. But this is actually something I'd rather take up and talk through with the land use subcommittee and these more specific comments that you got from Kurt with regards to the map. And I don't know that we necessarily need to have that conversation right now, but based on what you've told me so far, I have an initial concern that Kurt is envisioning something that's getting a lot closer to a new zoning map than a planning map. And so we need to find the right balance.
You're correct on that, although his comment generally was that, like on the water sewer map, because it's concentrated in a real small section of town, you really don't have a good idea of where it actually covers. So if that could pop out as an inset or a hover or something like that.
Yeah, we could definitely do a village. I actually already have that sort of on my potential do list, is that several of those maps would benefit from a detailed village version. So the transportation one would, where it shows where the sidewalks are, for instance. You can't really see it you can zoom into it, but you can't really see it at the scale of the map very clearly on the page, on the printed page anyway.
Okay, I just wanted to pass that along. And yeah, you're right. Land use committee or you and I should go over Kurt's comment at some point.
These many, many comments.
Many comments.
There you go. So I think what we've got from this chapter and where it's going to benefit from a next draft is maybe that this one, taking away some of the specific recommendations. Some of the ones are good, and like 5-4, support ongoing public-private land conservation, like things that are kind of broad, but taking away ones that maybe on here, the 5-6, advocate for complete street improvements and keeping those over in transportation, but setting this chapter up as a foundation for what we can do. Like, what does Enfield look like from a land perspective? If we think about that, not just land use, not just a zoning map, but the land, and that dictates a lot of what's available. That does have an impact on our streets, on our, all these other chapters. And it might be a really great foundational chapter. So when we're thinking of the next edits and going around, and so I think that is meant for the subcommittee.
And can I add on to that, Lindsay, that Right now, the plan is set up so that the chapters build to land use. The way
Uh-huh.
you're speaking about it, you're envisioning, I think, putting land use first and then doing the more detailed chapters after that. So that's something to think about a little bit in terms of the organization and how those recommendations relate. That, there's not a right or a wrong solution here. And you actually see plans that go in both directions. Some start with the land use and then do the more specific topics afterwards, and others sort of do all the little subtopics and then get to land use as sort of the final product of that discussion. So whichever way it flows, but that's what I'm hearing from that comment there.
Or is there just from your experience, Brandy, is there a more natural flow when you have, like, for a place, again, let's think about Enfield specific, but where we do have a lot of land features that do, not that other places don't, but like in towns like ours, where we have lakes that break up things, where we have different features that really do impact what we're able to do. We're not on a nice flat piece of land, so that, we can, what would your recommendation be?
Well, in 25 years, I've put them together every way. I've used every outline.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you have better?
I don't actually necessarily have one that I would advocate for, beyond saying that I think the key chapter of the plan is the land use chapter. So whether you want to start with the most important thing or you want to end with the most important thing, my perspective is that this is the most important chapter, because this is the real core of what your plan is about.
Okay. Other committee members' thoughts as we are thinking about this, because it's going to affect your chapters. If we start, I think now that we started to see some things, what do you think?
Can I jump in here with a thought?
Sure.
If we're trying to tell a story, which I think from the point of view of the casual reader, that's what we're trying to do. You would start with the vision, because that's kind of the hook.
Yeah.
And then you would go to the land use chapter, because that impacts everything. And then you would go on to your individual chapters, like housing and transportation, economic development, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just my 2 cents.
Other thoughts? Anybody else have a feeling?
I just feel strongly about showing more on the maps
Okay,
about the land itself
sure.
and what we have.
Yep. So some map improvement.
Like if it's forested or it's wildlife, to have a outline or something to show that.
Okay.
If it's prime wetlands,
Mhm.
this is how far, that'll give people an idea how far they have to be. They want to build, they have to be so far from them. That also entails the wildlife and all that kind of thing. I think those have to be pointed out, because there are a lot of people want to live in areas like that.
Sure, and some of those might be further down, like, we want to make sure we're not doing a zoning document, which give all the but maybe there's links to some things.
We could set
Set it up, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like a couple layers. Remember that this is a layered, this is not meant to, Brandy pointed out in one of our meetings, which I thought was great, like, this is 3 layers or so, and
Yeah.
so, not this, as it is not meant to be printed quite, it doesn't always translate
Yeah.
quite as well in print, but yeah, and that's where I think we can
I'm
use
just thinking
technology
about how
to,
people have lot sizes on their mind and want to
Sure.
break them down. And so what would be good?
right, and some of
Yeah.
that may having to link to then what the zoning regs are, but not, but just a plain
I'll
down.
give you an example. I don't know how you would do this, but there's a lot across the street from me that was sold, and the person lives in Kentucky. And somebody came up there and they started marking trees. So their plan is to go and clear cut it so they can have a view. Now that whole thing there is part of a wildlife corridor. The wildlife, you get moose, you get deer, you get everything that crosses that goes through, goes down, gets into these prime wetlands and all the way down to Bicknell Brook. That's a travel corridor. They got to, I mean, if you know, that's where I'd love to see somebody like the building person say, well, get the house over here, because then you won't interfere with it and have it so many feet away from the corridor.
But I-
Those kind of things that would make it really nice.
Sure, but I don't
People
know if the master plan can do that, and I don't know if we can do that at all.
Maybe. I don't know if anybody's done it, but
So,
Like-
I would respond to that, Celie, that I still do need to have a sit down probably with Rob and walk through the natural resource inventory mapping and finish sorting out what's the most current. I think the only aspect of what you're talking about that's probably not in the maps that are there already is the wildlife pieces. So the wetland components, the all the riparian pieces are in there, the soil information and the slope information are there. So it's really the question of the habitat maps, and those, it's just confusing. I need some guidance to figure out what it is I'm looking at. I kind of just have a big pile of stuff in front of me that's a little hard to interpret since it's not my stuff. So that just, we need to sort that out. Now, you know, we can pick that conversation up a little bit more about how robust you want to be about recommendations and policies to protect habitat, you know, based on the information that you've got on habitat once we kind of sort that out.
And there are recommendations, so, okay. But anybody else have any, again, just the structure, the overstructure, if land use is after vision, we start with the vision, that big picture, but if we start there and then trickle down, or if everything else should,
I agree with David. I think it makes the most sense to have it up front.
okay,
It's either up front or last, right?
right,
And so I think it makes most sense to have it first, get everything right with it, and then all of the subsequent chapters will support it. I don't see it makes much sense to reverse that.
Okay.
Just my 2 cents.
okay.
There's a chicken and egg thing going on here.
Mhm.
And
We gotta pick one.
because, well, yeah, because there's this overlap with all the other chapters.
Mhm.
But there's a little bit different, and maybe it makes sense to get land use first. But one of the things I'm not sure I really hear coming out of land use is a real understanding of the land itself. In other words, where do we have low-lying land that creates challenges, and where do we have?
Well, that's Celie's point with the map, that we could do a bit more there maybe.
Because as you talk about land use, you talk about zoning, and I think a lot of people think there's a real disconnect between zoning and the actual characteristics of the land that is zoned. Whether it's, you know, recreation land or waterfront land or unbuildable land or forest land for forest purposes.
even if there was a soils map, a contour map, people can look at it, see the numbers. You know, where is the soil good, where isn't it?
Well,
And
I'm almost like, that's not something that people need to refigure out. There ought to already be an understanding of what the usefulness of land is and what it lends itself to. What, you know, clearly lakefront land lends itself to lake recreation and perhaps
That's true.
seasonal use, you know? And yet we don't seem to have, you know, have to sometimes talk about other communities, but you have Hanover that has forest and recreation zoning because they have areas that's what they want them to be. Number one, they're way too far out to be part of the mainstream of what goes on in the primary part of the town. And they don't want to have people with 4 and 5 bedroom homes and 4 kids out there because I don't want to have to bus all the way out there to bring them to the schools. And that makes a lot of sense. We don't have any rationale like that, it seems, with the zoning that we have.
So
Yes.
I think that's a really good point, and you could come to that conclusion based on the content that's in the chapter, but we can strengthen that line of reasoning by calling out and working on the text, I think, and strengthening that. And the other thing that in my punch list I noted, I'm not sure the build out map is really working in the way I had sort of initially intended that it might. I think it's a bit more confusing. It's useful information and helpful in sort of assessing what your current zoning is doing. But the other map tool that might be more useful in the plan would be to do a suitability analysis, which is really a mapped version of what Celia is talking about. So you take all these factors and you sort of add them up, and finding the areas that have the least constraints or are the most suitable for development, and those areas that are not available or have really significant constraints, and start to show that. So you can then use that as a stepping stone. And I think you'll find that some of the land use mapping, land use areas kind of reflect that. But I think the point was raised by Kurt during the land use meeting that many of those land use planning areas contain land that's a range of suitabilities and characteristics. So there's steep slopes in some of that areas, and there's wet areas in some of those. So they're not all, it's not all the same. And but we can talk about that, I think, and make the language a little more clearly to bring readers along to get to that conclusion.
I think that's what as a layman, that's what I would like to see, because it's great to look at soil maps and wetland maps and all that kind of stuff, but that's not my I want to know, like, if I'm a complete novice, which I am, and that's who we have to write to in a lot of ways, like, where can I build, where can I not build, it's like, and we've got the maps and the definitions, but like, not like, come to some of those conclusions and outline those. You know what I mean? Like, maybe not use the word to build, but like, but really kind of really clearly define areas that are suitable for what activities and what are not and why, and draw those conclusions for people, not leave them up to looking at all the maps and coming up with their own conclusions. But we can show you on the maps, but like, I think we need to draw some of those conclusions.
I think you have to put out that it might not be on the map. Okay, somebody might have a field, and which is a lot of times happens, and there's a wet area in it.
Yeah.
And they call them a wet meadow, so it's got the wrong kind of soil for it.
Wow.
But it doesn't show on a wetland map. The soil
Yeah.
map.
So I think that, so we're some more refinement there. All right. But I think it sounds like that we kind of think that starting with land use and then using that to help us establish, and then kind of what we can do in these other chapters. Sounds like the best bet or best structure for Enfield. That was in my pocket.
I was hoping it wasn't full.
It was not full, but I brought the leash with me.
Whitney Banker, you should know that David Frack is now in person.
Hi,
So
Whitney, wherever you are.
hopefully not at the hospital. Okay, any last comments on land use? Great. Next meeting we had was, what was it? Housing.
Housing, yep.
And again, there was Ashley, do you want to talk about what you took from that meeting, your observations?
Sure. Well, I think the last thing we were talking about is a good segue in that there were some folks in our group who did want to see things more clearly laid out as to like, where is it that I can build or where can be developed, not where we're going to, but what is possible. So that seems like a good thing to expand on. We talked a lot sometimes about different language that could be used, and some of it was in the weeds, but some of it I think was, there was some consensus on about affordability and workforce housing and defining those more clearly, which Brandy noted and her points to consider. And also that there may be additional data, I think she mentioned, from the census that we can put in there to build out on. There were a few points about, I think, private property owners and mentioning language like that, and just a couple of words that for some people were a little more triggering than others and maybe had either positive or negative connotation versus a neutral reading of it. There were a couple of times when those things came up that everybody seemed to be like, oh yeah, that is the case. And I don't know if there was too much else that wasn't already in her points to consider about kind of developing a few of the links between housing and land use. Community services did get brought up and infrastructure got brought up, which I think seems like we could develop a little bit further, but as Brandy noted, we intend to have more about that in the future. So I don't know how far we go into it.
Yeah, if I can chime in here, I think one of the key things here is actually the second point. And Rob, this is actually more of a note for you and me to remember. I actually forgot to write it on the punch list earlier this afternoon, but Tim raised this point about the capacity of the water system. And that is something that we should definitely hammer down and make sure we've got good and accurate info on.
Okay. Presumably the sewer system as well?
No, he was focused on the water system as being the limiting factor.
Right, he was talking about like where we've got the town wells and all of that, so, and like they're scoping out new sites, and so his and I think your point number 3 on here as well, Brandy, is something that we should consider how to address, but it needs to be addressed further in a different chapter, but it definitely came up, was just like the link between community services and housing, like
yeah, the one thing that could be helpful here is to emphasize the location of the housing really matters. So this idea of cost of community services, it's actually at this point now a kind of old planning idea. It had just sort of emerged when I started as a planner in sort of the late 1990s, and it was really popular to do these cost of community service studies. And I did actually a number of them when I first started, and you can run them all the time and you get the same answer. It's really convenient. The answer is that houses cost money and don't generate enough in taxes to cover that, and that farmland doesn't cost you anything and pays a little bit in taxes, so you end up ahead with farmland and you end up behind with housing. And this is, repeated in rural community after rural community across the country. The USDA came up with this formulation, and yeah, it definitely comes to the same answer every time. But a certain number of people have really latched onto this, and it sort of has become a truism for them that if you build housing, that it is always going to cost the community more to provide services, and taxes are going to go up for everyone. But it's a much finer truth analysis that actually has to happen about where this housing is, and actually what level of service you already have, and sort of how much you can accommodate, because service is not a direct line. It's not a straight line that, for every additional house, they have X increment of police services and X increment of school capacity. It's a series of steps, right? You have a classroom that's got 13 kids in it, and you can put 19, and everything is fine right up until you get the 20th kid, right? And then you need, boom, it's a step. You need another classroom and another teacher. And so most of these services are like that. They're not a straight line, it's a series of steps. And so these cost of community service studies don't actually really reflect the details of what the relationship is between development and property taxes. But anyway, I think we can talk a little bit about that. The one other way to think about it is that putting housing in your areas that are already served, so on existing roads where you have water sewer, is a win, because your increment is very little, because you're not building out anything new. Whereas putting housing out where you might, as Kurt suggested, have to build new roads, or at least now have more traffic on roads that are poorly constructed in the first instance and are going to wear out faster, those are going to be much more expensive per unit costs to go to that house. So that's the kind of argument that we can make, and try to, and then when you do get around to working on your municipal facilities and services chapter, you could go into it in more detail.
I thought the perspectives that Holly West brought for just and that it definitely states it in the last paragraph right before points to consider, that helping, to helpful to builders and developers. I think that, and I do have the housing chapter here. As she's trying to build houses and affordable living, however that's defined, that just I'm going to read through this again kind of with that lens as well, like how do we help facilitate building of, but in the places that we want it to be. I think that's always that thing,
And she brought up sort of, she sideswiped a point that and it isn't really detailed out in these notes, but she brought up sort of alongside a point that a lot of other builders have raised when I've done affordable housing type work in other communities, which goes back to actually Celia's point about the suitability of the land. And that is that you can't put a modest house on challenging, difficult, expensive to build on land. So even, there's a financing piece that goes along with it. And if you have a site that is challenging and difficult to build on because it's steep, or you have to put in a long driveway or a very expensive septic system, you actually have to put a more expensive house on that property in order to make it possible to finance the construction of that house, because there's a relationship between the value of the house and how much goes into the site costs that the bank demands. So that's one of the other reasons to really look at where you have the more suitable land, because your only chance of getting, I would hardly even describe as affordable housing, but let us just say more modest housing is on land that is easy to build on and not high cost.
Right.
It's hard right now, I'll tell you that, because all the prices are skewed all over the place.
Yeah, at this point, modest is $400,000. I will say, but if you want to keep it under $500,000, then these factors really do matter.
Well, I want to say one thing I'm concerned about when people quote the amount of the house, how much a house is, they're selling for $485, and they average it all out. We got to remember that people have been building $1 million homes, and that goes into the pot to average everything out. So I'd like to see take out some of that lake property that's way up there and then go in and see what your housing is.
Mm.
Um,
I think one of the things, I don't know if it got brought up in a different conversation and something, again, I need to sit down and read through this better again, but is also, how do we protect the smaller camps and the old family camps on the lake property? So they're not, like, how can we? So it's not just all turning into $1 million homes and they're getting wiped out,
well,
and that's part of our heritage.
by the law, and a lot of people don't follow the law.
Right, but
And,
also.
I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, that's why you got these big, huge houses. I've been
Sure,
involved with them going up. And they're not coming out
But
like they clean.
Is there a way that we can, as a town, start to protect and say, we have a priority towards our camps? Or is it just,
I mean, you've got private property rights to consider too,
But you have to protect those lakes.
I agree, and, maybe that's done through the building inspector in the permitting process.
Well,
I mean, but is that a priority? I
Would you
think, I'm
possibly-
talking about the, families who've been here for several generations that aren't trying to build a giant thing, just want to be able to keep their summer camps that they have, and,
A lot of people can't afford the summer camp anymore.
right, and, right.
So that's what
I'm saying this off of the conversation you and
So
I had.
that's what
so
happened to
without-
my family,
Without
right? I
calling that
mean,
out.
it's personal experience. We couldn't afford a house in Massachusetts and a house and a camp here. The taxes on the little camp here were so high. Little camp, 1,200 square feet, that we combined and moved up here and renovated. Now, you talk about the house is not turning out like according to the plan. The building inspector in Enfield was out to our renovation all the time and kept saying, nope, you can't do that. Nope, you can't do that. So I don't know how it's not coming out to plan, because no, it was Phil that was the building inspector then. He was out all the time, and
that's good to hear. But
Yeah.
my years on the
I knew it was that year.
conservation commission, I'd be out in the lake. And people come in and get their permits. And they'd be allowed so much.
Yeah.
Land, and they can't take this off. They have to have a certain footage and have certain land.
Yep.
Vegetation, so on and so
Yep.
forth.
permeable
To the
soil and all that.
And a lot of people didn't do that, and I'd be out there and somebody's running a bulldozer, they've already gotten their permits. I mean, I saw it over and over and over
Really?
again. And so a lot of people on the lake, they say, what are you gonna do? You
Huh.
know, and then they say, well, call the state. Well, the state doesn't have the staff to come out. So we really need to keep those wetland laws in our zoning.
All right,
I have a
Yeah.
quick question. So we were just discussing like the question about what it adds to town services, like how many houses, and I know there's no perfect maybe formula,
Mhm.
but is there a way to discuss that? So in the way of trying to inform people and maybe help with that kind of stigma, like talk to the fire chief and the police and just say, out of a town of this many, like what would be that next capacity where you would actually be concerned about the force and like what we can provide for services, just to give people an idea of, we're not saying we want to see Enfield be 10,000 people in the next 5 years, but what's the wiggle room here?
So that is what you would do if in the full-fledged facilities and services chapter, is that you would get a much better inventory of your existing capacities and infrastructure. And then you would have that better understanding of how much you can accommodate without expanding that. And that then ties back into your capital improvement program and things like that.
So can we make a reference, because we know
Yeah.
these chapters are coming, to kind of be like,
I think that's what we have to,
missed
I
it.
think that that's what we have to do. What were you gonna say?
Vital Communities has a really nice slide in one of their presentations where they showed different development patterns, one being sort of the 2-acre lot with a house, and the other being an in-town redevelopment project with multifamily housing. where, and what they're highlighting is that you generate far more tax revenue through the infill development than you do through the 2 acres in a house. And they used real examples within the Upper Valley. The 2 acres in a house was actually in Enfield. And I mean, I forget the exact numbers, but it was like 4 or 5 times more value created
Mhm.
by redeveloping an in-town lot versus, you know, subdividing your town into small lots and building, you know, dispersed housing. And something like that might get to, you know, a way to frame the different options to people and help sort of present the way, if we do this, you get this kind of tax revenue with less services because they're all in one place
Mhm.
versus, you know, one house way out on the furthest edge of town, you know, generating less revenue, but probably consuming the same services because they're so far
And
out.
actually creating more strain on those services, especially if there's like trash or recycling, you know, and they have to go that much further, because Sal's gonna charge us that much more.
And we're just talking about like the buildings are gonna be a lot more money because they can have so many
Right. 'Cause if you-
housing units.
Right, if you take
So
2 acres in town,
that's-
you can have 8 buildings on it or 10 buildings on it, which have 4 to 8 units each versus one single family home on a 2 acre lot. And then, and they had a really nice presentation, sort of showing the
Yeah.
two. They were both very attractive. Some people would want one, some would want the other. But the conclusion was if you want to generate, you know, if you want to increase your total list property values, the in-town developments, keep it all compact, you maintain your out of town, and you generate far more value.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another way of illustrating essentially what I was describing before. And you know, the thing to keep in mind is that the unit that your municipality is taxing on is acres of land, right? So the more efficiently you develop those acres of land, your tax dollar return per acre goes up. So if you can do that within the scope of your service capacity, then that's the win in the fiscal game.
What about the school tax? Because that's a big issue. For people coming and you're gonna build all these housing units, you're gonna get all these kids.
Yeah.
The school tax is the highest.
But it's not gonna change it right now.
Yes, it will. Not like,
It
Well,
will, as
kids go
far
to
as
school.
the average daily membership amounts, if we end up having more than Canaan. Right now, Canaan has more kids than Enfield. They pay more than we do, and that's why it's a big problem. But the big chunk is coming from the renovation. That doesn't go away until that's paid off, and it doesn't matter. And right now, we've been losing, where we actually do have room to add students to our schools. I mean, the questions are starting to come. Do we need to start thinking about what happens when we have so few? Do we have to consolidate somewhere?
Yeah.
So, and that
We
would
need
be
to get
even bigger
Canaan.
problem if we were to just close this building, you know, or.
Well, look at the
school, what
last
do we
3
do?
census, right? The last 3 census, Enfield's gone down.
Right, and so,
Yeah,
but,
so we do
but-
have some wiggle room there.
Right, so I think
Yeah.
here what we're talking about is like, if you're looking at it from a planning perspective, yes, you can say things are going down. People are using that to, why would we build services? And then if you don't have any services, people go, why would I want to live in a
Exactly.
town
Yeah.
where they have a subpar
You got to attract
fire
people.
department and they don't have a library? And then they don't want to move here, and so then there's a bigger strain. So this is like that big, so where's the bliss point is a hard calculation to make. There may not be one exact one. Some of it's a balance between building, encouraging development where there's already municipal service. So can we do some of that math and say, here's where we want to encourage development? Yes, we understand some people want to live out on 2 acres, but if we can concentrate this, we're going to get better tax revenue, which is going to provide some relief. But we also then need to use that in our facilities chapter that we haven't yet done, because our police department can only effectively, or our fire department, let's do fire, can only really effectively, you know, like there's an incremental stage to where they need another truck or another station in order to be effective, you know, and that they're, so that's figuring that out. So we probably have to have a footnote that says,
Yeah.
coming soon, but that municipal services do depend on the number of people, like we have to
Yeah.
figure out that balance.
I
We're
guess
always
it's that
looking at
balance of
list point.
like educating people that we do know about it, but it's not in this chapter.
Right,
you will get more
and
info.
some of it is, they all intertwine.
Right.
Right? And so not everybody moving to town is having kids. We have to remember, that doesn't always mean children. Right. There are lots
In
of,
fact, the majority are not. So houses no longer come with children.
right, and there's a lot of people in my generation and even the next that don't want to have kids. Like, that's just not the norm. It's not always the natural flow of, because it's too expensive. So I know a lot of millennials. I know a lot of people who just don't want to have children. So it's not a foregone conclusion. All right. Let's go to the transportation focus group. And Brad, Eric, what did you glean from the meeting that you were there? Anything
Well, the best suggestion we had, I thought, was to include a small summary of the changes that have happened since the prior master plan. And like on transportation, there's a few clear things we can look at, like the sidewalks, and there are multiple bridge replacements that have all happened since 1995. But most-
Yeah, several bridges.
and, basically all of Main Street was redone. And most people would consider that an improvement, and it's the kind of thing people are talking about more of. So just having some small section where we highlight the things that have been done to say, look, we're continuing what's already going on. I thought that was a good suggestion.
I thought some definitions, in particular, complete streets would be useful. And there were some other terms that were mentioned that people just didn't understand. We all are so used to them, but there were other terms that we should probably define. I thought that was a good comment.
I think that's a really good reflection, just because listening to what people are saying, and not making sure we add those definitions, like Brad said, it gets us, I think it creates more issues than solutions, and then misunderstandings, which lead into people just putting their feet down and saying, nope, not doing this because you're suggesting craziness, but they don't understand what the thought process is.
And you could do it a couple of different ways. You could actually explain it within the text, or you could have it hot linked, right?
Yeah.
Where you could hover over it and there would be a definition,
Mhm.
something like that, which I sort of favor. But yeah, a lot of different ways to do it.
I mean, as much as I love the links, though, I think the biggest challenge, and maybe it all goes into the end, is, I mean, hyperlinks are great if it's electronic, but if this gets printed,
Yeah.
where does that then go? So then we're gonna have to have all of that somewhere, some of that information, whether it's just a website or whatever we end up doing. So how do you make it flow nicely without a hyperlink versus,
I think there's ways, if it's hovered, like that actually comes out in print.
Print.
Yeah, it does it in a slightly different text, or it
Does it in the margin?
does it in the margins. Whereas then people don't have to go to a separate page and then
Yes.
remember to go back, and they end up with like 50 tabs open too. So that's a technical.
Yeah, we can work on that. I think, in terms of your print version, there's the possibility of doing some things as more of an appendix, to pull out some of the things that we might do as sort of pop-up information within the online version and things like that. So I was going to raise the fourth point that was here in transportation. This actually came up in almost at least 3 out of the 4 meetings. Was just, and I think somebody raised this tonight too, of really sort of needing to explain to people what a master plan is, what it's supposed to be doing, sort of how to read and interpret it. But we don't have that piece, and we didn't initially sort of have it in the outline. I do think we're going to need it and get that. So you'll see that shows up in the punch list outline. So that came up in transportation. It came up in economic development as well. And I think it may have come up, I can't remember whether it came up in land use or housing, but I think it came up in one of them as well.
mean, I think that's gonna be huge to the presentation, even at town meeting is like starting right then and there, just because that might help reframe some questions that are gonna come out, being like, oh, okay, maybe I
Well,
won't go down that road.
We've done
right?
that several
Yeah.
times. David did it
Oh,
at the
yeah.
last town meeting, but I think you're right. I think it's gonna be
We
again.
gotta beat
It's
it.
every,
into
Don't
yeah,
beat it,
you
just
get
a
new
Yeah,
faces.
what is the master
new
plan?
pe- yeah.
How does it use? Again, that it's not a zoning document. It's not that, but
Yeah.
it's a guiding document.
And those words are very important. I think it's
Mhm.
not a zoning document,
Right.
Right,
right? Because people are thinking it is.
It's to guide and it,
Yeah.
you know, hopefully like zoning regs will be, you know, use it as the inspiration to update, but it's not, you know, it's not just that. I thought one of the interesting things that came out of the transportation 1A was just clarification of why some road, like keeping roads dirt versus paving,
Mhm.
and also private roads versus public roads, and
Yeah.
just pulling that out, like to me, that was.
Yeah,
um,
the whole dirt pavement was interesting. That's the
Right,
first time
and
I
I mean,
heard that.
I live on a state road, it's a bad state road, but
Yeah.
it's, you know, like I.
What are you talking about? So smooth.
Oh, I love it right now, I love the frost heaves, it slows people down,
Does.
yeah. But like, I thought that was really, again, fascinating but the other thing that I did like, there was a conversation about just being prepared for when possibilities come up. So we talked about the traffic flow into the elementary school
Oh,
and
yeah.
like
Yeah, that was interesting.
the importance of the elementary school and the importance of the elementary school to the village, that it's, you know, but that it creates, it's a dangerous traffic flow. It's, you know, I mean, it's a pinch point, but there was an opportunity. And you know, what do I say, Enfield motto, if we get sun, not this year,
Now's not the time.
now's not the time.
Can't wait.
But to get some property off of
Flanders.
Flanders
Mhm.
and to create a different traffic flow. So it was a one way, but that didn't happen because, you know, now's not the time. And but so if that's a priority, how do we prepare for the next time there is an opportunity to say, you know, and empower the people to, you know, the folks in charge to say, oh, this property came up, let's grab it for the town and rethink this or something like that. And I thought that was a really interesting conversation, especially with places like the elementary school, which can be dangerous, or it backs up Route 4. And, you know, and then obviously there was the Route 4 at Maple Street intersection continued issue that we have to work with the state on. I mean, that's just not Enfield's.
Throw the thing over to the.
But, you know, I mean, cars have to go in, they have to turn around, they have to come out, there's all the walkers that go in, it's all in one spot. And so, but I thought that was really interesting. And if there's a way to like capture that in this chapter to prepare people's minds. I mean, we're always like thinking right now, but like, what's the future? That to me is what the master plan is
Yeah.
just also being like prepared
You could,
to act.
you could
and
add a
not
recommendation
always-
to the transportation chapter.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how you'd word it, but you know, keep your eyes open, stupid, right? And
I
take-
say move
That's a
with
really
that.
good, that's a
Like
really
that.
good rule
Right.
when you're driving anyway.
yeah, and take advantage of, you know, and these are some of the choke points that we could fix if we thought about it.
Right, and that's where I want this, the master plan shouldn't just be like, it has to be planning for the future. It has to be preparing us to take advantage of when opportunities come up and not just like, right now, we're still playing catch up with everything. And we're having to like, you know, fix things that just haven't been fixed and blah, 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 instead of being able to look to the future and plan. And that's just a different mindset. And that's also, you know, it's definitely a financial mindset for sure. I get that, like, you know, having a savings account is a financial mindset that not everybody can afford. So I recognize that, but I'm hoping the master plan can bring in. That stuck out to me.
I wonder if anybody ever thought of having the state move Route 4, bypass that whole area.
There's a whole lot of communities around this country that you can talk to, how when the interstate system came in and
Yeah.
suddenly their communities got bypassed.
Mhm.
And at first they thought that was neat because they wouldn't have all the traffic coming through town, and now those places are ghost towns because nothing comes through
That's
them.
what happened to Claremont.
Yeah.
Claremont was the hub. And when the interstate didn't go there and it went through Lebanon, it changed the Upper Valley.
Yeah.
You know, and again, we talk about it, we have 3 exits, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think 4, but we have 3 exits, you know, now several of ours don't really go anywhere, so it's like,
I think
but-
there could be advantages to the fact.
But
they
there's
don't go
some-
anywhere, so.
right, yeah, there's advantages if they don't go anywhere. I mean, that's where, and that gets us to economic development. Should we just?
Segue.
Segue.
Yeah.
Great.
So, all right, I'm gonna make a couple of real quick comments.
Unless there was anything else.
First, on the vision stuff, we had some discussion about the will be in several of the bullet points on vision. Enfield will be, Enfield.
We're
will
gonna do
be.
vision next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I want to do vision,
Okay.
because we did it in every single group, so
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. What I heard that came out several times was that Enfield as a government needs to be supportive of the economic development, and that without having either a real function in the government to do it, or at least the ties to the supportive programs in the community, in the, the region, that it's going to be hard for us to present to anybody who wants to be part of that economic development, that there's a serious level of support here. And so there were a couple of comments that Randy captured during that I thought got it at the bottom of the second page of, or yeah, on the third page of the notes. Kim Quirk said, the town needs a full-time economic development position rather than a combined planning and economic development position. And why don't we reach out to Tuck and Thayer schools at Dartmouth and get the Grantham Regional Development Corporation based in Plymouth, and why don't we have the town working with those resources rather than trying to rely on a nonprofit voluntary organization like EVA to be, the change agent for economic development here. I thought what was interesting about our focus group is that we had some real business people in there. We had Bobby Lambert from the Enfield Garage and the Medical Transportation Company. We had Kim Quirk. We had Julie Eckert, who's on the Economic Development Committee for EVA. And these were people that had real interest in what the economic portion of this master plan was. And I thought these comments were really right on. Jamie Ivey talked about that there's really no commercial space here. How can we be talking about economic development when there's nothing that's lending itself to commercial development? We've spent money to bring in the water and sewer, basically, because we have the capacity to do it. So we run it down Route 4. And yet the space that's along Route 4, nobody wants to use it because, at least as it goes towards Canaan, it's hardly usable. It's either low-level floodplain stuff or it's not going to make it easy to develop there. So I just thought that those were key comments that came out of the group. Then there was also this sense that if you're going to have the recommendations, the bullet points that come at the end, make sure that they are supported by land use. Make sure that we have zoning that can do that. And we talked a little bit about the 3 exits on I-89.
Mhm.
Repeatedly, I hear people comment, we have 3 exits on that. It's still happening. We've been talking about this for a year now. People still don't understand that. And then, well, everybody develops economic stuff around their exits, and yet we don't. And if we had a master plan that actually said, this is an area of opportunity for us, that might be more useful. Those are my takes away.
Yeah, I think listening again to Kim and Bobby, they felt like as business owners, they wanted to come to Enfield, and it was a great process and it was inviting, and they felt the tone of the chapter said the opposite. If a business owner was to read that, it wasn't sounding very inviting to them. And I know we talked about this and how we word things, and I did try to say, I mean, we had to take the information given to us and put it in the chapter. So it's not, we can't, you know, change the results of the survey and the stuff that has come back, but you know, maybe it is just how we word things, if there is a way to say it. But again, it might fall back to those recommendations and how we phrase those and what we are asking for that would help a business owner say, okay, I see all this, but in the recommendations, they are saying like the town needs to get more involved and will take more ownership of, or, you know, however we word it, but I don't have an exact way. But I'm just, you know, I think it was an interesting perspective, especially as people who own, that they didn't feel like their experience was what seemed to be semi-reflected in it.
You know, we've
So,
also.
oh.
Go ahead, Brandy.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that there was a visceral reaction to the picture of the Baltic Mills.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we talked it, and I even expressed that I had that type of reaction at first, and then it has tempered as I've considered it. But I think that's important because people are gonna look at this and say, why are you showing a picture? I see it now as a picture that shows opportunity, but people were saying, why are you showing this picture that looks like, you know, the past has now been beaten into the ground and there's nothing we can do about it. It's not an inviting, encouraging picture of the mill. And so even though I might now see opportunity there, I don't think that's the first impression that comes along.
Well,
So Brandy has suggested that if we can come up with some other pictures, that would be
Yeah.
great. But I think that's an important part.
And I see that as part of the punch list for every group, because pictures got brought up in every one that I was at, whether, and Brandy has done an amazing job of giving us some placeholders without, and where she can, but we need to find the pictures that we need to. So I'm gonna task everyone in the subcommittees to really start to, whether you need to get out and take them yourself, or we need to talk to Elisa, you know, what would
Well,
make
we're
sense.
gonna get the calendar pictures, right?
Yeah, the calendar
So-
pictures from Elisa, but what would make sense?
Well,
And-
one of the challenges
Yeah.
is that, it's, at least from the economic development perspective, if I'm looking at, let's just say, I think of another community, I might be able to get an aerial view of a commerce center that has lots
Right.
of stuff going on. Well, that's not possible in Enfield. So you either have to take a picture of Keene Medical Center, or a picture of Randy's Car Wash, or a picture of Revision Energy, and have, you know, it's almost like you're profiling one economic example.
Okay.
And if we don't have something that looks more like a broad picture, then maybe we need to create a collage or something that has little pictures of all of the different things, but it's in one single graphic. Because otherwise, I mean, Keene Medical Center would be a
I'm
great picture
gonna
to have.
task you all to think outside of the box and come up with some ideas. So, I mean, because it might be a collage, it might be a, you know, it forms, I mean,
Right.
but yeah.
I think that's a good idea. I want to mention one more thing to you, Brandy. And I just asked whether this is something you can do. I found it difficult to look at the PDF file on my computer because there were pictures and maps that crossed from one page to another as they would appear in an open printed document. If we really do think this is going to be an online document or have that parallel sense, is there a way that you can adjust it so that when it's a PDF or online document, things don't spill from one page to the other? Because most people would only be able to look at it one page at a time.
You have to open the 2-page
So-
view.
So there's two answers to this question. One is that when we actually do put it up online, it's going to be like one of those magazine flip books. Have you ever encountered one of those online where it actually looks like a 3-dimensional turn the page thing?
Yeah.
And so that will eliminate the problem of the layout challenge to some extent. Now, on your own version of opening up your files on your computer, I think I, for the most part, remember to set those to automatically open to 2-page view, but I think that people's own internal settings can override me as the author. And so that is actually something that you can set on your computer. There are ways of sort of printing it in what would be called page layout mode, where you see both pages up, but then that and making a PDF that way, but then that can be challenging for people who then decide they want to print their PDF. So there are pros and cons of the various technical answers. But I think the good thing to know is that when we actually create the version that goes on your web page, that will be formatted in a way that people will see 2 pages at once.
Okay. Thank
Yep.
you.
And so the one thing I want to say, one quick thing on the photographs, if you're going to, from a committee charge point of view, make sure that as you're collecting photographs, you're getting high resolution photographs. If you have a file and it's 200K, I can tell you it's not going to be big enough to put in this document and have it look decent. So we need good quality, high resolution photos. And thinking about the layout, so for instance, there was discussion of changing out the photo for the vision statement. One of the reasons that photo works there is because it has sort of large swaths of sky and water with that I can put text over. So when you're thinking about those pages that are sort of set up as the photo is a backdrop and there's text in front, it has to be a pretty uncluttered, unbusy photo. So things like the collage you suggested won't really work very well in that context, but could work somewhere else.
I might have a photo of the other side, the end.
I got that.
Because I've taken some photos from the bridge, so, and I
So-
have a very high res camera that will probably give you a large enough photo.
So what kind of?
Yeah, if it's something that's been taken with someone's phone that's, within the last couple of years, then it's probably going to be good enough. But I know that people often, like, you think you're talking about some sort of community calendar thing, like people who email photos can sort of dumb them down when they email them. And so you can end up with something that's not going to work in the end in this document. So just be aware of that as you're collecting photos. Yeah. So I wanted to come back around to the economic development group. I think that they came up with the point that was raised at the first meeting with the land use chapter about making your case. The sort of, I don't want to say they're first and second, but they're sort of the 2 top sort of policy and really content questions for you as a group to be mulling over. And so the economic development group raised this question of, is it Enfield's vision that it's going to remain a bedroom community? That's a really fundamental question that gets at a lot of the, shall we say, more visceral reaction that the business people who participated in the economic development chapter review had. In that sense of feeling unwelcome is really tied to that idea that Enfield is primarily bedroom community, a residential community, and business is a very minor secondary thing, and it shouldn't infringe on the primary thing, which is residential and in some ways recreation. And so that question of whether that is the vision and how you see yourselves and where you want to be, I think is a really fundamental one that bears more discussion and probably bringing back to the community. But it's definitely written that way right now. That is accurate.
I don't think it was in there, but I could be wrong. But I would love to see, they were talking about like the business directory that Eva has. And I know it's gonna, it is online now and everything. I think it'd be great to have that linked and tied in. And I don't know if we have it yet, but just as, again, an educator for how many businesses are in Enfield so far, or what types are in there. I saw a mention of, a bike shop somewhere, like we, things that we might have that people don't know that we have. It's hard to know, especially when they're small businesses and maybe they have like a niche thing that they do. So they're not gonna be Jake's. You're not gonna just drive by it on the main road and know that it exists. But I'm just wondering if I don't think we have it tied in there right now, but I think that could be an interesting kind of link.
That could certainly be done. And I had put in that map where I had found the business points, but that comes off the assessor's data and what they have identified as commercial property. And certainly it's not capturing the things that are more home businesses. And so those are probably still classified as residential. And so it's certainly an underrepresentation of where there is businesses in town. So that is something that could be worked on as well.
There was one other point that Jamie, I think it was Jamie Ivy that brought up, was we refer to Enfield destinations and recreation for people as both part of our vision and the economic opportunities here. And there needs to be some way to make people understand that the destination isn't just the lake or the trail or whatever, but it's the ability to come and make it a destination. You can park, you go on the trail, you get a cup of coffee, or you skate on the lake, and you rent some skates, or there's all of that other part that supports the whole concept of it being a place people want to come to. And I don't think we really capture the message in the chapter that says that is what we will be. We'll be more than simply the water or the trail. We're the place that you can come and enjoy the water and the trail or the whatever, because you're not going to fight over parking. You're not going to wonder after you've skated on the lake, where can you go and warm up? Oh, I'm going to go all the way to Lucky's Garage in Lebanon just to get a cup of coffee and a hot chocolate. There's got to be that portion of the support here to make it, because not everybody's going to live here, or for the ones who do live here. If you're out on Lock Haven Road, you want to come skate, you're still not going to want to have to go all the way home to get that extra part.
And I think that ties in nicely to, I think what was in the transportation conversation about like signage. I think, and we've talked about it in the EVA economic development meetings too. We've talked about it here, that is something that we could look at and update some of the signs. Like I know with the intersection of 4A and Main Street there, we have that sign that needs to get updated, you know, I think it's been a conversation. But you know, if you want people to come off of a main road, like that's kind of our disadvantage, right? Main Street is not really visible, all parts of it from Route 4. If you want people to come off of Route 4, you have to give them a reason to, and you're gonna have to tell them. Locals are gonna know, or at least have an idea of where to go, but we're trying to pull even more than just locals. And by having some of these activities, businesses, recreational opportunities, like man just said, you're gonna get them here, but then what? If they don't know where anything is, then what good does that do anything? So, and I know we have smartphones and maps and all that jazz, but so it's just again, it's probably an ask of town, maybe, or
Okay.
whoever.
So what I'm hearing, without problem solving how to do the stuff, which is not, is that in the master plan, we need to have, like, again, and remembering this is not a promotional document. So we have to have that balance. So I guess I know there was a little bit of pushback, like this sounds negative or whatever, but this is not a document that's putting out there for promotional reasons, like come live, come build, come play in Enfield. That's not the purpose of it. So we have to keep that in mind, right? Before we're just all rah-rah language. It is a snapshot, but it is also what are we building for? And we are building for a complete experience, but also probably not being a hub of everybody's day job. So is that the balance? Like I think the way I said it earlier, one of the things that I've always thought about is like, we're not the 8 hours of people's workday for the most part. There are people that work from home. There are people that have their businesses here, but most of our residents work somewhere else. And that's okay. We want to capture the other 16 hours of their day which is sleeping and playing, or, living. And, we may not have a grocery store because we're not in a place where grocery stores are gonna build at this point in time, unless we have a large population. That's not within our control. But how do we have a more complete experience is what I was thinking. Like, if you go to the lake, you can get a cup of coffee. Right now, we don't actually have a place for you to get a cup of coffee. So, I mean,
but not like a,
kind of, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit, Jake.
but
so,
yeah, not the.
but we can, say we're supporting, we're building, we want to be. This comes into having mixed use downtown, and holding developers to first floor commerce, even though they say it doesn't sell. Well, they need to fill that space. That's their responsibility to fill it, because that's what we want from the town, so that we have this complete experience for people. And then we can create maps and that kind of stuff. I mean, that's who we want to be, but we're not going to be where, like, the center of where most people go to work. But we capture the rest of their days, right? I mean, that's to me is what is a little bit more than just a bedroom community. That's a community. Like, and that you want to play in, you want to visit your neighbors, you want to have community sense. Is that what we are? And is that what's missing from our guiding principles, is creating that sense? Is that what they hear? Is that what we have heard versus just what I think we want? I know what I want to say, but is that what we're hearing? And that's where, if it sounds negative to business owners, how do we create, like, that's small businesses, and that's a very particular types of businesses. Out Route 4 is a different type of business, and on the exits is a very other different type of commercial building, right? And we want to attract all of them so that we make the most use out of our economic development. And isn't that what we're putting forth in the master plan? Food for thought. Love to hear from other people.
I would chime into that just briefly, Lindsay, that the folks that we had in the economic development focus group definitely had the perspective very strongly that the purpose of the plan should be to seek to attract more business to Enfield. So I think looking at their comments and notes, it's good to know that that was definitely what they saw as a primary purpose of the plan document itself.
Is it?
What I was gonna say, like, it's
That's my
all
question.
wrong, right? I mean, in a way, we are not only a guiding principles, but we reference all the time, what if somebody from the outside is reading this document? So it's
Mhm.
gotta have some kind of open language to show that we see what our land use is like, we see what our housing potential is, and we know how this all feeds together. And we are interested and invested as a community so that your business has the potential to be successful here. I think it does all feed together, but obviously it's maybe not its full main purpose, but I think it is a purpose of it as well, personally. It's not gonna, well, we don't want it to.
But are
deter
we
people.
interested in attracting certain types of businesses, or are we just attracting businesses?
Certain types.
That's for us to put in I think a recommendation.
Right,
So
so
what do they have call it, like if we had something that like Dartmouth has these startup,
Incubator type.
incubators,
yes, like the,
Yeah.
or,
an incubator program.
right, they have a lot of different things, and your idea was good because a lot can stem out from that tuck school and everything.
Mhm.
And it's not my idea, it came out in the group, so.
Yeah.
I mean, because that was some books like with Dartmouth, so if a research center is gonna open up their own research building, why couldn't they do it on exit 15, or on top of,
I think it's like, so just taking a mind's eye, and we don't have to answer this tonight, economic development team thinking about this, like, just think about what does economic development in Enfield look like? What have we heard from people? Okay, Silicon Valley is very intentional. The types of places that they're attracting to Seattle, that starts to get intentional, right? Like, we're not gonna be Silicon Valley or Seattle, but you know what I'm, just if you have this view. Is it just like, we just want businesses, we don't care what they are, let's get more warehouses, let's get more, trucking, whatever, like, just, it's like to me, like, more warehouses. I wouldn't, that to me is like, that's economic development. You get people
Like
in,
Etna
you build
Road.
but is it all what we want? Or do we want to say, we want to attract, downtown businesses to help complete a recreational experience. We want to attract businesses to our that suit being right off the interstate, which might be trucking companies and warehouses and that, because it's good, easy access. And if there's a place to build there, we want to build out Route 4 to have amenities for people so they don't have to drive all the way, just drive through us on their way to Lebanon.
Right.
Or are we trying to find more, or are we trying to attract the engineering firms and a new hospital wing? Again,
I did bring up the whole being proactive versus reactive thing.
Yeah.
so,
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
real quickly. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community over the last year
mhm,
that says we really favor small businesses,
Right.
okay? I don't think there's any question that seems to be the predominant message. The problem that seems to have arisen is that we think of small businesses as being independent in terms of the development of their business properties. And so a coffee shop's gonna come in and build a coffee shop. A bike shop is gonna come in and build, or a kayak shop is gonna come in and build a kayak business location near the lake. That's never gonna happen with a small business, because a small business is never gonna be able to put the resources together just for their own means. What you see in any other community is a commerce center of some sort. It maybe has 3 to 7 to 10 storefronts in it that a developer puts in place and then leases out the storefronts to those small businesses. And so the small business isn't going to come and look at the master plan and say, hey, do I fit into this master plan? It's going to be a business developer who comes in and says, I want to put in a small commerce center that'll attract some number of small businesses. And they're going to say, where can I put that in this town that's going to make sense? And then they're the ones that are going to worry about leasing out the space to somebody that works for it. But they're the ones that are going to read this document. And they're going to say, "Ah, that's not going to work here because there's no place for us to do it. Or there's no place for us to fit it in." And I'm not talking so much about zoning as I'm talking about, how do we fit that in? And instead of we need to stop thinking of it in terms of targeting it towards any specific small business, but targeting it towards something that's going to pull the small businesses into it. And I don't see that in here. And I'm part of that, but I don't see it in here.
But we have all that. We have a lot of that with some of the stores. The storefronts are empty on Route 4.
You don't have a single developer who's trying to lease out those storefronts. We even talked about the fact there's no commercial real estate people here. I mean, maybe Vanessa Stone might find a place for somebody if they come to town and they say they need it, but I mean, if you look at other, I'm not trying to, I'll use the word strip mall, but or strip shopping, that's not what I mean, but it's just a small commerce center that somebody else is trying to fill. And it's not because Lucky's, put a new coffee shop here and I've renovated a building just for Lucky. That's probably the outside opportunity. That's not the mainstream, at least not these days.
David, what did you say?
Well, Maynard took half of what I was gonna say,
Okay,
Good half of the bad half.
the good half, of course. So, what I was gonna relay to the group was, I think it was James Ivy asked, what would attract businesses to Enfield? And after I thought about that for
maybe 30 seconds. My response was, well, the same things that would attract people who want to live here. And I started listing off, okay, if I was, bringing a small business to town, what are the advantages of Enfield? Well, there's a lot of recreational activities. People can walk or bike on their lunch hours. After work, they can go out on the lake and fish or kayak or do whatever they do. And, to make that kind of a pitch or include it, when you're trying to bring in fairly small businesses, and you're probably, anywhere from 1 to a dozen employees, that kind of thing could be a big selling point.
So again, I mean, I see it in small chunks in here. I don't think it's not in here at all, Maynard. I think like we talked about the infrastructure on Route 4 corridor that has spaces. I don't think it's outlined like, but maybe it's where's the mechanism, and are we going to proactively say here's space? But then again, are you looking at strip malls? When you say small economic center, the first thing I think of is a strip mall, and like what's the look of it? What's the, so there's some things here, but again, identifying how this chapter can then help guide other committees and our town leaders into the work that they need to do is and also, if we are welcoming that, I mean, we say we're welcoming it, but there are some very sore, the dollar store is a sore point. Not just like the way it's located, the fact that one exists here, and then the way it's oriented. I mean, there's a lot of like Jake's rubs some people the wrong way, is a sore point, even though it's a great, like we just, again, and we're not trying to satisfy everybody, but it is like, how do we say we are pro economic development that's within what makes sense for a small community? Is that what we're trying to do? Are we trying to say downtown, we want mixed use and we want to have, and then we, for new developers, no, yeah, it's hard to rent that commercial space, but it's up to you to rent that commercial space. We've given a lot of passes because people have, so that's the past. How do we now as we move forward? And that's what it has to be in here. And I see it in some chunks, but maybe it's not strong enough. And maybe that's where we have to just dig in a little bit deeper and expound on it, on those points. If that's what we were hearing and we're trying to develop. Because we've got the strengths and we have the weaknesses, like we have to point out the weaknesses. But we also have to say what we don't want, but we can focus more on what we do want. On the work that needs to be done on this chapter. Brandy, any thoughts there? I really want to get to visioning and
No, I think we do need to carry on.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of talking through the punch list as we go along too. So I don't really know that we're going to necessarily need to do that as a separate item, short of just sort of figuring out maybe spending a few minutes on timeline. So I think if we can do vision for a few minutes and then talk about that, that would be good, because I know you do aim to be done in the 8 o'clock timeline.
Right. So just to reiterate, all this feedback that we're getting from people is really great, because it is showing us where we need to improve what we're explaining in this master plan. So this is really, even if it's like people had negative reactions to something, or we're not showing this enough, we know that these nuts and bolts are here. We know what we've gotten from the survey for the number of people that did take it. And so this is where our chance to improve. So this is all good all this feedback is really good. We just have to process it, and not every single piece has to come in. Let's take that into visioning. And there was definitely, I know in 2 groups, at least, there was a very robust discussion about some very specific words in the vision statement. And maybe in the guiding principles, I definitely know one person thought they were too wordy. And it seems like maybe we're missing a little bit of economic development in the guiding principles. But Maynard, you were starting to say, you were talking a little bit about what was brought out in your group or in the economic development one.
Just a comment that
Yeah.
came up was, it seemed to, instead of saying we, Enfield is,
Uh-huh.
it was Enfield will be. And there was concern that, oh, so we're not already actively protecting our diverse resources, or we're not already honoring our unique history, just because it came across as, is this a vision of how we, if we're stating a vision, are we describing the picture? And if the picture is being described, why are we using the future tense to describe it? That was the way it came across. And
Okay.
that's just the feedback that came out.
Yeah, that's good. Brandy? Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I think there is a problem in turning it to the present tense. But I think we can work on the wording to maybe something along the lines of we picture Enfield as a community that da 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 da, or something like that. To be honest, I don't know how widespread this perception would be that a statement that says Enfield will be a community that is welcoming means that Enfield is not a community that is welcoming right now. I don't know that that would be the majority of opinion if you were to go out and poll people, but obviously we found at least one or two people for whom that was their reaction on that formation. So I think we can look at that a little bit, but I have to say that I think putting it in the present tense takes away the function of the vision statement being a forward-looking sort of
And
that picture of the future.
That's always been my understanding of what a vision statement is. It's not necessarily that you're not doing it, but it's the thing that you're constantly striving for. And it actually should be something that is maybe not completely attainable. Like,
Yeah, that would be another formulation, you know, Enfield will strive to, da, 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 da. So there's various choices of wording there. We could play around with and explore.
I don't know if it's happened in the other groups, because I wasn't able to participate in the other groups, but our group really did seem to get hung up on words and wording. And this was an example of that. And then the other one was we had a 10-minute discussion about the word rural,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
We did get into that conversation.
And almost like that's pejorative somehow or another, that if we use the word rural, people are gonna think of us as, you know, Hooterville or something, because we want to maintain, you know, that like it was a backwards kind of a thing, which I found surprising, but that it really came out.
As I read the notes from that one, I found that really surprising. I feel like every time we've heard that from somebody within the community, it's been as a positive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, let's keep our.
We want to
rural-
keep our rural.
Let's keep our rural character. It's
I was
always-
surprised too. It didn't come across, I mean, I was surprised at the reaction. It wasn't just one person.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
I think you might be seeing some of the breakdown of the crowd. So that was the economic development group, obviously a self-selected group of people for whom that's a priority issue. Whereas if you were to talk to a group of people for whom you know, conservation issues are a top priority, then the word rural is their aspiration. And I think you'd end up with a different perspective on that. So once again, I think probably that it's useful information to know that there are people for whom the word rural has that negative connotation. It is not something that I've heard come up very frequently as being a pejorative word or leaving people with a negative reaction. There usually is a lot more of what you saw in the survey results, which is, you know, people really valuing the rural character of where they live.
The ones that came up, so we, I don't think we had a big discussion in land use about the vision. People just sort of like, yeah, we like it, right? Do you
Yeah.
recall? And then, but it was in the housing group, and the word manages was And then the phrase necessary change was were the two hot button pieces of this. So the idea of manages got a little political, which I was talking with Brad before this meeting, like it's been interesting that we've not really talked about that in like this, the master plan task force has been we haven't really gone down any political realms, I think, or avenues, and really kind of like, is this word triggering to this group of people or this group of people? And there was definitely some thoughts on manages was like you're trying to tell me what to do.
Property rights.
Property rights.
Was the overarching theme.
And then what is necessary change? So then we talked with, is it inevitable change? Is it and I know we had a robust discussion over, I don't remember it at this point. I'd have to really go back and find that, the meeting where we created this. And I don't want to change anything right now, but we definitely want to keep some of these things in mind. Are there some words that do need to be re-looked at without being overreactive? Again, we've heard from, one or two people, and there was, and in most of the groups, there were people that definitely got into, and depending on the personalities, really got into like this word here.
Wordsmith.
Right. Again, Kurt was bringing out like our rural character. Well, I'm embracing 21st century and those are diametric. And I'm like, but they don't have to be, so there were some wordsmithing by different people, but manages was definitely one in our group or in the housing group, and the phrase necessary change, like, and who decides what's necessary was sort of the like challenge to that.
The residents who spoke in the survey.
People who show up to town meeting. I mean, I didn't say that.
Can you, well, I know we're not trying to wordsmith, but by manage, we mean guide, right?
So
Can that be that's not exactly,
Or
but,
control.
well.
I feel like we just went in
Manage,
another
that
direction.
That would now work.
We're
Yeah,
gonna
that's what people
dictate.
Well, just,
People say.
I was just reading that paragraph again where,
Sure.
where you were talking about the conversation. And I feel like the
Well,
way it's
there might
intended
be,
is
there
to
might be some, I
guide.
don't want to wordsmith today. I
Yeah.
think let's put this in our brains.
But
We
yeah,
may have to do another little activity as a group, and play with some words and just see how things feel, if they still represent what we've heard. This is not about our own personal, like, you gotta step out of your own personal triggers and stuff like that. Like I was expecting welcoming to be like the trigger from, and that wasn't, it was manages and necessary change. And like, how do you define those two things and not necessarily even them together? It was like, so let's, were there other things? And then one person did think the guiding principles were a little wordy. And then it seems like maybe with the economic development group, we didn't really put in like like as I read each guiding principle, it relates to something more directly, and that the economic development one gets a little lost in guide point 3. And that might be something to consider, that might pull out a little bit more business friendliness. It's in there, but it's buried under some other recreational things. And maybe that.
I think I do agree that those could be tightened up. I think that in an effort to be all inclusive, they have gotten a bit bloated in a couple of places. You know what I mean? Like you had your list of keywords, and you were really trying to get them all in, and maybe there is some need to filter and prioritize a little bit, and to sort of say that some of them are going to make it into a guiding principle and some are not.
Yeah. And so maybe it's one of the things to add to the punch list. I might add to the punch list for each subcommittee is find the guiding principle that sort of relates to your area and see if it makes sense, right? If it would be an overall summary statement in a way, and there might be. I feel like they're not always just directly related to one chapter, but they are, they should be present in there.
Yep.
Right?
And we heard that too, in our
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah.
There was some question about, how's this giving us any guidance on economic development?
And I can see how it's gotten a little lost in there, and so you may have to pare it down. So this is a good activity.
This is Phil Vermeer here. I'm reading through the vision statement. I think it's too wordy. It needs to be trimmed. It needs to be trimmed back some. I just sent Rob a vision statement that I came up with back in January of 2021. We probably need to relook that.
Okay.
I was always taught in the military that a vision statement should be a vision statement, one statement that captures where you envision the town of Enfield being 5 years from now. So take a look at that, Rob.
We will put re-examining vision statement on a future meeting. And pull up an activity, I think, is maybe the best way to deal with this.
Is out of curiosity, so we're gonna present what we have at town meeting. Right. It as a draft form and kind of send it off with people.
We're not gonna send it,
Well,
if it's not ready to
send
be
it.
sent off at town meeting, we're not gonna send it off.
Do we have them? So, because we're only going to, I mean, this was our intent to get the feedback from smaller groups. And I think it was important, like you said, right? Because it was tones you never would have thought would have upset someone, but it's good to know that it, I mean, all of that is good to know. Not that you will ever please everybody, period. Is there a way to capture any more of that? Or do we just kind of say we've done a lot, we've done the best we can, it's not gonna happen? You know, I'm thinking, like, without making it huge, if we put it out there for everybody, but while we have captured attention, I guess was my thought of potentially more people that are feeling more invested because we just talked about it. And where we are.
I think the idea is, assuming that we have a reasonably good draft that we can present at town meeting and send people away with either copies or links to the website, is, let people read and digest, and then have a wider community meeting where we gather more feedback. And we keep repeating that process
Yeah.
until, as you say, we're never gonna get 100% buy-in from 100% of Enfield. But at least, we'll have made the effort with a series of small focus groups and larger meetings. And we can say without any reservations that we think we've captured what the town wants.
I would say, I get concerned when we keep repeating the process, that we have to say, here's your chance to chime in. And then we need to write it and say, this is what we have. And then because it's gonna be continually updated every couple of years, there's an opportunity, because if we just keep repeating the process and waiting for people to chime in, we're never gonna get it done. And then we're never gonna be able to get to the next chapter. So I would just, my other thing about town meeting is just, I would be,
Well, we don't want to get them.
it's only a month away. There's a lot of work that has to be done here. We shouldn't send this out for a next, like a community wide. I don't think we should send this out for a community wide thing until it's fairly polished.
Yeah.
And so, because of some of the stuff that we got, and people were very overly concerned with wordsmithing, with editing, with pictures,
Grammar.
map colors, all this stuff, and that was not, and even though their instructions were about the actual like content and ideas, they still came with like a list of edits. And we have a few people that are definitely have volunteered to help edit. So Brandy, they're out there. But I know I like to have other people edit because I'm terrible at proofreading. But I don't want us to get caught in that when we present it to the town, say main ideas, and we have to really control that, but then we have to just be done, and it's not going to please everybody. the other thing about town meeting is that there are some pretty big hot button issues that are gonna be on that meeting, and people might be pretty either gone or exhausted by the time you get a chance to present.
I think we should
So-
start with this. It feels happier.
So you might want to just do an update.
So that was a question that I was going to pose to you guys as well. I wasn't really envisioning or had a really clear sense of what you wanted to do at town meeting, or sort of what you were thinking that step was going to be. Given what I've managed to patch together of Enfield politics, it does sound like it may not be the best venue for bringing out something that you want to get general support and a positive reaction to. But it may be a good opportunity to announce that you are going to be having this upcoming public meeting, and sort of when materials are going to be available. So I think, if by the end of the next task force meeting, you are comfortable that you've got the schedule hammered out and know sort of what work needs to be done, and that we're actually gonna be able to get it done on time to set that meeting date. And then you can advertise and promote that you're having this meeting. You might not necessarily have the draft for the town meeting in April ready to go. You may have a part of it. For instance, you might be able to distribute the vision statement, easily at town meeting, or have that, up sort of as a poster format or something like that, as sort of an enticement of what's coming, but not sort of get this dragged down into the mud of the public debates that will be had at town meeting.
I'm just worried that because it's gonna be towards the end of the meeting, that people are gonna be spent and or not in the best of moods. If it was like last year, it's freezing. Hopefully it won't be. We'll have a lovely, beautiful April day, but they might just be, mentally.
To counterbalance last year, it's probably going to be 90 and humid.
Hey, dude, I live in that weather all day long. Bring it. So we should talk about it more at the next meeting, which I may not be at. So, you know what I mean? But that's my thought on town. I don't know. Anybody else?
I mean, I wasn't here in the meeting, but I did note on the minutes talking about how we were all feeling going forward in the future. And I would agree with that a little getting closer to the finish line and maybe a small break before, and if all people feel like continuing on would be a nice vision, I think, for some at some point.
Well, and we can't rush the end product, but we
Exactly.
also don't want to never get there.
Right.
We have to set an end. Yeah. Or will implode.
So-
I'll turn it to an I statement.
So you've seen the punch list that I started on, and you guys will probably have some of your own items to add to that. So it's really thinking about your process, how you guys are going to have time to meet in your subcommittees, and then get material fed back to me, and then I put it together and get you a new clean draft. So that's kind of what I'm looking to get a sense of from you all, is the turnaround time that seems doable for you.
Anybody, turnaround time. So our next meeting is April 11th, which is 2 weeks from today.
I would think we're gonna spend both April meetings on getting all of this stuff together, punch list stuff. So, let's let's try to be realistic and say, we're just gonna do an update at town meeting, and when we're happy with it, then we'll start looking at it.
I do really like the idea of the vision piece being a poster for people.
could
I
happen.
think that's it would attract attention. And then again, maybe we have a very simple, direct them to the LEAPS website. We can make a QR code if we have to, but you know, whatever it is, like put it right next to it. There's something for them to take away with them or whatever, you know, like just that kind of easy directive. It might inspire people to go looking for more. So.
Yeah, getting some vision statement feedback at town meeting that can get set up, and or having something set up on the website. So we can generate some feedback on that piece, and then having the bigger chunks hopefully ready and somewhere in May with the update would be.
Because I feel like there's a lot of talking and there are some slides at town meeting, but if you give someone something to look at, they're not gonna be over it.
What do we feel like?
Just-
Well, I was gonna ask James if he had any input, but he got quoted a lot today. For the next meeting, as we're trying to make for the next meeting in April 11th, what is reasonable to arrive with, or do people need, should we make that subcommittee work time? I mean, what's gonna be the most beneficial for this group?
I mean, we have 4 chunks. What if we split the next 2 meetings into 2?
Well,
And the
there
vision
needs to be
statement,
some work done in between the meetings regardless.
Yeah.
For
Right.
example, I need access to pictures in order to help
Mhm.
Brandy make selections and recommendation to this team, so.
Mhm.
And I would love to know where and how to send pictures, Brandy, in the best way so that they keep their larger format, because I feel like even Dropbox, when I do things, shrinks them on me. And others.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and what kind of resolution do you actually need?
I can look at those pages, but if you think about those pages as sort of being 11 by 17, like those double pages, and you want it, somebody else can have to do the math in their head. You want those images to be at least 300 DPI, so that's 300 times 17 and 300 times 11 for the resolution. So as you can see, it's not, you know, it's the standard kind of photo you take a good quality with your iPhone these days. But if somebody has then sent it by email and it has gotten shrunk down or saved repeatedly, it might not be at that quality anymore. So it's a matter of making sure we've got sort of original high quality things to work with. And it's more of an issue for those big pages. So when we just have smaller photos in, you know, that are just a couple of inches in actual print size, that's not such an issue. But it's those cover pages really do need a good quality photo.
Brandy, one of the things that I've found over the years is that a big spread that is going to be used as, that has a background that you can put type over, you don't need as good a resolution as you would need for a smaller image that has a lot of details. If you know what I'm saying.
Well, I think it somewhat depends on the effect that you're going for. So, I mean, there are also some ways that we can sort of blur out or soften out a picture too to make it that kind of backdrop. But yeah, and I can set up a place to drop photos, but I guess what I was just trying to advise is if you are going back through, say, the calendar photos, you know, looking at the size is a good a good sort of first cut of what may be more usable than
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell by some of the calendar photos. I can tell what's a phone photo versus not. But if you have a way, yeah, to just or tell Rob or something where I can photos, I can do that on my personal computer and they'll be much larger. I was trying to think of a way to hook it to town, but I don't want to. My personal computer.
Okay, so again, for next meeting, what's gonna be the most helpful use of our time? I would like to do the vision piece on the 8th, on the 25th. I know it's cutting it close to town meeting. I won't be here next meeting. I'll be in Mississippi. I'd like to be here around for the vision piece if we're gonna like figure out our own activities. So I'm gonna ask that we table that one till the 25th. What is the best use of time for this group? We have a lot of work to do. What's the best way to do that for everybody? And I know we've got 2 different chunks, but that would mean 2 groups would only have 2 weeks and 2 groups would have 4. Like it's, I just want to see if there's not a lot of work to do or how can we best use what time we have right now?
Well, it sounds like economic development
Mhm.
needs a lot of massaging, so
Okay.
maybe they ought to go on the second meeting in April.
Okay.
So are you suggesting that all of us in this room would be working on helping one chapter, or are we talking about focusing on 1 or 2 chapters in the next meeting and working collectively on those 1 and 2 chapters, or splitting us up into, or just subcommittees in the meeting and working on the chapter? I'm just confused.
My understanding is that between now and the next meeting, all 4 subcommittees will meet as many times as they can and bring your work product back to the group. And we will discuss as a group the edits and the changes that you have made in the subcommittee and kind of go from there. Is that everybody else's understanding of how we should do it?
Yeah, I think you go back, you revise your chapter, and you come back with your revision, which at that point, honestly, we should pretty much have a draft of the whole plan.
Okay.
Because everything will go through a revision cycle. I won't be here in 2 weeks either, but we actually don't have all that much on transportation. There wasn't a huge level of change. I think we could probably go in 2 weeks.
So why doesn't transportation and housing go in 2 weeks?
Who
And
else we done?
land use and economic development, which I think are both gonna need the most working time to do revisions, go on the second meeting in April.
Okay.
Is that sensible, Brandy, from your point of view?
That works fine, and I will be in touch with Rob to talk about when we can sort of start hammering through some of the more technical and research things that need to be done to fill in some of those remaining holes too.
What's the best way to present this to the group? Should we take the existing document, the existing text that Brandy put together and use track changes?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't.
I think that you guys should still have a Word version of just the text. It might not be complete, it doesn't include the sidebar things and the things in boxes and stuff, but I think you have the main body of the text as a Word document, so you should be able to go right ahead and edit in there if you want. If you don't, let me know and I can produce one for you.
I'm looking at PDFs on my,
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been way back, like we would be involved going back. I definitely have them here on my computer, and I think that we shared them around at one point, but it may be that I sent you PDFs so that everyone would have the same page numbers.
Back when you got the chapter,
Just have
there
her
was a
resend it.
Word
Just have her
document.
resend it.
Have them resend it, okay.
yeah, if you could,
Yeah.
I think that would be the best way to.
Okay. Yeah, I can resend those. Yeah, because I definitely have them here on the computer. I'm looking at them, but yeah. I tend to PDF things so that I know I have some guarantee that everyone's looking at the same thing on their screen when I'm talking.
Looking for a motion.
Okay, I think that sounds good. I think that gives us an idea, and yay. All right. So, yeah, looking for, seeing as how our one public person left, there's no comments from the public. Can we have a motion?
I'll make a-
Anything else that anyone is burning with in the group besides burning one to go home? Okay. Motion, please.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you
We got a
for,
second to see if we can come up with.
Yeah.
Can you corral your brother
Lindsay, so
and
I'll
go
tell
through
you.
the
Okay.
chapter?
I'm not